If you want to understand true cruelty in the 41st millennium, you have to look past the Chaos Gods and the Golden Emperor. When an entity is a cosmic god, the word disturbing loses its meaning. The real horror belongs to the conscious mortals of flesh and blood who actively choose to soak the galaxy in violence. The 41st millennium measures horror in the extinction of star systems. System-wide annihilation is the standard against which all other atrocities are judged. Take Gazkul Thraka. After a bolter round destroyed a third of his brain, he was rebuilt with adamantium plating and exposed wiring. He woke up hearing the commands of the orc gods and immediately set out to wage eternal war. He doesn't conquer for territory or status. He orchestrates the slaughter of entire sectors because he is genuinely enjoying himself. Gazkul demonstrates that even genocide can be a form of holy celebration. But the physical end of a life is finite. The next tier of cruelty focuses on the terrifying prospect of making a victim's existence last forever. Stepping past physical violence, we hit a tier where surviving is the worst outcome. Death is final, but eternal conscious preservation turns time itself into a weapon. The Necron overlord Trazyn the Infinite has spent millions of years turning his tomb world into a personal museum. He houses billions of sentient beings inside stasis galleries, freezing them precisely in their final moments of sheer, blinding panic. He exhibits a chilling, clinical detachment to the torment. To Trazyn, an entire civilization's culture and suffering are nothing more than inventory data points to perfectly curate his displays. The dread here comes from being completely aware for 10,000 years, unable to move a muscle, knowing your eternal scream is just an art installation for someone else's viewing pleasure. Notice how this defense grid collapses from the inside out. Shattering a population's sanity is highly efficient. The Death Leaper executes this flawlessly, slaughtering a spiritual leader's guards nightly, leaving him alive and drenched in blood. Guaranteeing panic completely disables the defense force. Other entities use your own emotions as the weapon. Lucius the Eternal carries a living curse. If an opponent defeats him in combat and feels even a microscopic flicker of satisfaction in their victory, that exact moment of pride triggers their slow, conscious doom. The victor remains fully conscious, trapped inside their own mind, as their flesh stretches and bones twist. They watch their own hands deform into his and hear their voice shift to match his tone, ultimately burying their memories beneath his madness. This method of destruction is viciously insidious because it offers no defense. It takes a victim's most basic, unavoidable human reactions, raw fear or fleeting pride, and uses them to orchestrate their downfall. If psychological warfare is highly targeted, the next tier scales it up to a massive, industrialized level. Here, physical and mental suffering are no longer the end goal. They are simply raw, measurable scientific data. The Dark Eldar Haemonculus Urian Rakarth has spent tens of thousands of years perfecting the art of keeping biological subjects alive far beyond natural limits. He disassembles living captives, keeping them entirely awake through endless dissections. Similarly, the former apothecary Fabius Bile operates with a compulsive, methodical drive. He engineers genetically superior psychopathic beings to replace baseline humanity, entirely convinced that the agonizing deaths of billions is a perfectly reasonable price to pay to unlock biological perfection. But the absolute peak of this calculated biological nightmare was achieved by the Iron Warrior's warsmith Hansu with the creation of the Daemonculaba. Looking at the schematic gives you a sense of its grotesque mechanics. Captives were locked in cages, force-fed nutrients until their bodies massively expanded, and surgically altered by dark mechanics. An adolescent boy was then sealed inside the subject through a reverse cesarean section and left to gestate, turning living humans into mass production factories for new Chaos Space Marines. By fully industrializing the process, human life is completely stripped of its humanity. It is reduced to a disposable, mechanical component on an assembly line. We now reach the highest tier of horror. These acts are not driven by blind madness or scientific curiosity. They are executed with absolute, unwavering philosophical and spiritual conviction. Conrad Kurz, the Primarch of the Night Lords, treated terror as a moral philosophy. He achieved a near-zero crime rate on his homeworld through extreme theatrical butchery, hanging bodies from high windows and blocking storm drains with severed limbs. He believed that absolute, paralyzing fear was the only legitimate method for social control. Then there is Typhus. Once a trusted officer of the Death Guard, he orchestrated one of the most calculated betrayals in galactic history. He deliberately stranded his entire legion in the warp and unleashed a plague of demonic insects, trapping his own brothers in a state of eternal, agonizing biological decay. He didn't do this to simply kill them. He engineered weeks of unrelenting physical torment specifically to break their spirits, pushing them until they would voluntarily surrender their eternal souls to a chaos god just to make the pain stop. What makes these specific monsters uniquely terrifying is the utter absence of doubt. They execute unspeakable atrocities while feeling entirely logically and morally justified. Lorgar Aurelian, Primarch of the Wordbearers, expanded the scale of horror from individual suffering to the systematic damnation of the human race. Driven by an obsessive, compulsive need for divinity, Lorgar spent decades worshipping the Emperor. After the Emperor violently rejected him and forced Lorgar's legion to kneel in the ashes of a destroyed city, that humiliation pushed him to deliberately seek out dark gods who would actually accept his devotion. As this diagram shows, it started with a single source, the Book of Lorgar. By authoring the foundational scripture of chaos, he triggered a branching contagion tree, multiplying into thousands of cults seeded across hundreds of worlds. He engineered a deliberate chain reaction that physically severed the Imperium and actively doomed trillions of human souls over 10 millennia. Lorgar authored the blueprint for the destruction of the human soul. The weaponization of pure, unshakable faith has proven more destructive than any alien swarm or biological nightmare.